Hello, everyone. Very, very, very warm welcome to today's SAP Community Call. My name is Lena. I'm part from the SAP Community and Influencers team, and I'm moderating this call today. Very excited to have the SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Global Controlling team with me today, as SAP Analytics Cloud is our spotlight topic for October. And today we will learn all about SAP Global Controlling and how it delivers trusted expense plans by using SAP Analytics Cloud. With me today, our three speakers, Antoine Chabert, Product Manager in SAP Analytics Cloud, Nick Verhoeven, he is Solution Manager for Planning and Analytics, and Natalia Tyagunova, Senior Controller in the Corporate Controlling team. They are presenting to you for the next 45 minutes, roughly. And as you all know, as usual, we then have a dedicated Q&A here in the YouTube chat functionality. So please ensure that you're all logged in with your accounts here in YouTube to be able to participate in the chat and really use the time and the chance for you to address your questions directly to our experts. It's a recorded session. The recording will be available directly after our session for you to share. And we will also, of course, share the slide deck with you after the call. And with that being said, if there's no questions now, I'll hand over to Nick to get started.
Thank you very much. So I'm truly excited to be here with the team. So Antoine telling about where we're going with the product, myself about the positioning of the product and the recent project. And of course, the meat and bones of today, Natalia making sure to discuss what has actually been done for travel and expense forecasting. So the agenda for today, of course, a disclaimer, we're going to show you also some new and nice stuff coming up. So therefore the disclaimer, but the agenda for today, I'll start with explaining why are we even discussing planning and forecasting today? Why do we think it's so relevant? It should be part of the community call. So what is our vision there? Then we'll go into the use case of Natalia, with actually an update, what has been improving over time in her use case. Then myself, I'll be going into a project that I've run with the colleagues of Natalia to productize the learnings from Natalia's project for other accounts. And then finally, we get to listen to Antoine to figure out, hey, the feedback that we got from this project and also other customers, of course, what has it led to when it comes to product developments and the direction that we're taking. Now, planning. Why is it relevant? Why is planning and forecasting so relevant today? And xP&A, in case you're wondering, stands for Extended Planning and Analysis. So we see organizations worldwide, and what they're all trying to do, as we've always tried to do, is to become more intelligent. So intelligent being more efficient, being more effective, doing things better with less, typically, and also getting a better bottom line result. But now, also being as sustainable as possible. We think about the future, we think about all of the stakeholders there out there, but we have to do so in a time in which continuous change is the new normal. And yeah, we can lead it out, but you know what's happening. We see the blocking of the Suez Canal, we see a huge inflation, we see geopolitical influences making sure we can't deal with trusted partners from the past anymore. So what do we need to do? We need to adapt quickly. We need to make sure that we rechart the course of the company. And we can only do so if we can easily recreate a plan, have a new focus of the direction that we're taking. And that's why planning is truly a business imperative in today's day and age. Finance, we see, is a strategic partner to facilitate this extended planning and analysis. And then extended planning and analysis means that FP&A, finance, would be a key partner supporting strategic decisions, but those strategic decisions are aligned, meaning we have the different lines of business, we have strategic and operational thinking, but those elements are in sync. So we set a financial target, we set a strive what we want to achieve, then we see operational realities boiling up, we get those as inputs, we realign, make sure we reset the plan and thus have one connected plan from strategy all the way to operations and effectively looking at execution as well. So thinking about the use cases we'll be presenting today from corporate controlling, they need to be able to reforecast quickly, be a strategic partner for decisions of the CEO and the CFO on what will we communicate to our investors and what is the direction that we can take going forward. So this is really the strategic partnering where finance plays a pivotal role in extended planning and analysis, or extending planning beyond the borders of just finance. We have a strategy for that at SAP, and it's threefold, and it's put down here as plan to win. So we won't go into the full strategy today, but we will touch on the different points and focus on one of the three pillars. First up, we have transform planning. So this is this extending planning beyond finance to the different lines of business and extending it from strategy to operations. This is where we use integrations to SAP systems to make sure that the plan actually comes to fruition with execution, but also connecting to our different lines of business applications. And we facilitate there by an open planning platform through which the results can be reused over these different elements. The third pillar, plan with confidence, is all about making sure planning begins and ends with data, that you do so with trusted data. Thinking about the controlling use case as well, we make use of live connectivity to review the data, to get the same data over similar master data dimensions. So making sure you have confidence over the plans that you have. But the focus of today is really about that analytics infusion of the strategy, driving agile decisions, making sure that we can do full-on analytics, we apply predictive algorithms and have an automated forecast to a certain extent, making sure our controlling department has more insight and can do more with less time. And that's what we'll be discussing today. So driving agile decisions and predictive planning, what could that look like? Now, let's think about what we actually mean with that. So first up, if we have a platform that is analytics infused, we need to make sure we get the inputs. What has actually happened until today? Where do we stand? So this is information coming in where we can then model and visualize typical analytical capabilities, reporting capabilities from a variety of data sources to figure out why did it happen what we see today. The next step is that we can fully automate these inputs as training data to our predictive planning modules and figure out what would happen, what could happen if we would make no interventions. So automate that view of a forecast where we can machine-based already create a baseline, which can then of course be adjusted and edited, but we have a baseline, a strong, solid baseline. And that's the main point that we'll discuss today. Because with that solid baseline, you can take the next step and figure out what should happen. What type of intervention should we make to get towards that vision that we have? And then this plan is something you can, and you see this create data, push back to the surrounding applications so that we're all aligned on the direction that we're taking. But today we're really looking at that prediction element, automating a certain part of the forecast. And what could that look like? And for that, I'd like to give the word to my highly esteemed colleague that has actually made this happen. Natalia, it's all yours.
Thanks a lot, Nick. And hello, everybody from my side as well. I just will quickly take my slides as well. Yeah. Exactly. So I brought up with me an example of how we implemented a predictive model to forecast travel and entertainment expenses on the SAP Analytics Cloud platform in my team. And first of all, I would like to give a little bit of background where we're coming from, why we wanted to implement this example, and what are the major steps that we covered. So first of all, the core task of my team is to create a financial forecast for SAP Group for different positions in the profit and loss statement. So for positions for the revenue and expense line items. And one of the line items are the travel and entertainment expenses, and that's I'm responsible for. And therefore, we had a task to create a predictive model for that. So first of all, we had to pre-process the data a little bit and to decide what is the level to create a forecast, what makes the sense most of all. So first of all, we have a step of segmenting the data on the level of the different board areas which we have at SAP, because the travel pattern in different board areas, of course, differs, and it makes the model to forecast to produce a better forecast. The second trick, what we do, we actually split our travel and entertainment expenses into two target variables, which is the positive postings which are done. So for example, this is some flight returns and so on. So when we receive the money, and the negative postings, so when we spend the money for travel. And you here can see it also on this graph that these are the two variables, and the negative part had a very big disruption in year 2020 because of the corona pandemic, and that was actually point in time when we had to struggle with the predictive model, and we had to collect new data points which describe the new level of travel expenses, so that we can again gain relevant predictions from the predictive model. And the last step, what we see in SAP Analytics Cloud, once we run the predictive models, we can see the predictive forecast generated on different levels depending on which point of time we create the forecast during the year. So then we can compare the results with each other, also with the actuals, and see when the best forecast was produced. I also have brought a short demo of how we actually do the forecast in the system. Some data is blurred because actually this is a productive example. I will now run you through the demo of creation of a forecast in September. So meaning that our task was to create forecast for the open months in this year, meaning from September to December. And therefore I had to blur the data, but you will see all the key points of the process. So let's start with the first screen where we have a possibility to analyze the data. So for example, we can see what is the data pattern during the year. Then we have also possibility to see it in different tables. So for example, we can see the negative and positive part once we prepare it, and we can see also the negative and positive actuals per board area. So I click a button, and then there is an automated algorithm which runs and then splits my data into the positive and negative components, so that I have another graph where I can see both of them. That's exactly what I just showed you on the previous slide. And then I can also see the data, really the values of the data split into negative and positive parts. So I can validate, okay, if there are any outliers or the data looks okay, and then I can proceed. So if everything is fine, I switch to the next module of SAP Analytics Cloud, which is predictive model, and I want to run my predictive models. So I select, first of all, the data source, and then I have to, of course, give it a name. So this is forecast 9 this year. And then I have to say, okay, what is my target variable, what I want to forecast? And that's the travel and entertainment actuals. But as said, I first of all want to focus only on the negative part and focus this. Then I have to tell the model what is the date variable, because we create a time series model here. And I say I want the 4 periods to be forecasted. Then I have a possibility to say, okay, what is the segmentation of the data? And this is the profit center segmentation. So I can select different board areas which I need for the forecast. And you can see that I can define myself what exactly units I want to forecast, because the whole master data is also brought into SAC. So for example, I can also create forecasts on the L1 unit level, but I don't need it. So I leave it on the board area level, and then the next step, I have to define what is my training horizon for the data. And for this, actually, this trick, we only take the data which starts from the Corona time, so from the March 2020, because now the patterns have changed, and it only makes sense to take for the forecast the data which is relevant for the current period of time. So then I also can add an extra variable, so influencer, which can help to create a better model, and this is the budget which I use as an influencer. Then the forecast is created. This is segmented per board area. We also see several arrows here, meaning that we see, okay, how well the forecast was done. This is arrow valuation, which shows, okay, what is how close are the forecast values to the actual values here, how well the model performed. This is available for every segment here, and also an average estimation is available here. Then I have a possibility to go inside one segment, for example. I go into this board area, and what I see the forecast created. And I see it also have a possibility to see it per different component here. And we will see in a second that there can be much more components inside. In this example, we see only the trend component, which basically tells, which model tells where the target variable goes, like what is the direction. And then once I had a look there, we go forward, and the next thing I do, I duplicate this model, and I want to run exactly the same model, but for the positive part of the actuals. Okay, and for that, I have to select the other variable, which is the positive part. Okay, all the other parameters I leave unchanged, and I run the model again, and I get the results for exactly the same segments. We also see that, of course, here I want to stop as well. So here, for example, we see also the forecast produced. This is the dark blue line, and the light blue line, these are the actuals which I fed into the model. And you see that my forecast actually meets the actuals quite good. And then, as I promised, we can see much more components, which model includes. So for example, we see here the trend, cycles, fluctuations, and final residuals. So if we already talked about the trend, which shows us the direction where the actuals should go. When we talk about the cycles, this is something which model detects to be happening on a repetitive basis. So for example, here we see a cycle which is based on the year. So meaning that the model detected something in the actuals which happens on a yearly basis. Yeah, and this is also included into the final forecast. So there now in the SAC, you can see a lot of explanation about each of the components which belong there. So if you scroll, then there's really in the natural language reading, what does it mean exactly? So this helps also as well to evaluate your model. So if you are satisfied with the results, then the next step would be that we save the results into the planning model. And for that, I just select the object where I save it. This is my focus 9. Okay, and then it takes several seconds. Then first of all, we save the positive part. And then the second task is to save also on the same object the negative part of the forecast. And they are kind of summed up together on this object. And then we see as a result of the final forecast, the sum between the positive and negative component. And then the final stage is that I have also created here a tab where I check how the forecast perform. And I have here several graphs where I see, okay, I can display the actuals, which come there every month, and we refresh the data every month. And I also can see, for example, I compare here focus 7 and focus 9. Yeah, and I can see, okay, how well the focus 7 performed, and now what are the values produced in focus 9. I also compare forecast with the actuals every month when the actuals come in there, which really facilitates my work and makes it much more easy and automated. Okay, so was it from my side. Now I hand over to Antoine again.
Me first. I still have a few things to say about the use case that you've just presented, because I'm actually quite excited every time I see it, if I'm honest, because there's so many great things that you present here, right? You have first a bit of automation with the splitting of the negative and the positive, which you've worked out yourself, that gets more accurate results. Then you have the making it pretty, presenting it back in different ways, and making sure that the narrative behind the models that you've created, that you understand, others understand as well as making it understandable in that sense. And that is what has inspired me to reach out to the team and also yourself, like how can we work with this? Because with success that you've had by productizing your account using predictive planning, of course, the burden comes that everyone comes to the team at a Center of Excellence forecasting team that Natalia is in to figure out, oh, can we do the same? Can we also do this? Can we learn from this success? And that's something that I've jumped into the opportunity when it was given to me from the team of Natalia to see how we could productize the success from Natalia to other accounts. And I can already give you a sneak peek in the sense that it's been quite successful, as we've already productized the infrastructure expenses account, and it is live right now. And we're very close with the marketing expenses account. But what I want to present to you today is not so much the use case in itself, because I think that's been done quite well by Natalia already. But what I want to present now is the learnings from the productization project, if you will. So to walk through those learnings, let's look first at, if we want to productize, what were our main design principles? And you already heard it to a certain extent, right? We want to make sure that there's a large part of automation in there. And we want to do this to save time for the controllers. Predictive planning should work for the controllers, not the other way around. It shouldn't be an extra task. It should automate some of the tasks that they're already doing. So we want to automate wherever we can. The second bit is make it pretty. So Natalia did a great job already, and we want to reuse that smart way of presenting your results, and not just tabular, but also in a visual sense, so that everyone understands the learnings that you found quite easily. And finally, self-service. As you may have noticed, the use case from Natalia was presented by none other than Natalia, because she knows her use case in and out. She manages her own predictive planning environment. And that's, of course, something we want to leverage for the other use cases as well. So we want to make sure that seasoned controllers can run it themselves and are not dependent on others to make it run. We can go into them bit by bit. So let's start with automation. To think about automation, you have to do some pre-steps. So the first step is to think about the model and the predictive design. What do I mean with this? So for different use cases, this might look slightly different, but you want to understand, what is it that I want to predict? So taking that account to mind, and to what level of granularity do I think it will be relevant for my predictive models? So if you think about the profit center dimension, what level is needed? Do I also want to add additional dimensions? And always think, with additional dimensions and additional granularities comes additional complexity. So you have to make that back and forward with creating predictive models as well. What makes the most sense? What gives me the best result? Before you can automate, you need to test this out. So this requires some initial effort, but if you think this out pretty well, you can really automate to a very large extent. So thinking about your modeling, thinking about the predictive models that you will produce, and after that you can reap the benefits and automate to a large extent. The second learning is to make sure you align your timelines and schedules. And I can imagine that the pictures that you see here require a little bit of explanation for point 2, so I will. So what you see on the left is basically the calendar functionality in SAP Analytics Cloud. So that's the workflow. You can manage your tasks, you can manage your schedules, set up events. Now, you can set this extremely tight and hope that everything will run great. And then everything could mean, for example, what you see on the right, which is what we call a multi-action. So a multi-action is a combination of different actions that you can automate through this framework. So for example, you can automate that if a button is clicked or a time schedule is met, that data will be loaded. All the predictive models will be retrained with the newly available data. Outputs are then loaded into planning versions, and the outputs could potentially be further on allocated, or separate steps could be taken. For example, in the case of Natalia, we had this data action step that splitted the negative and the positive actuals, running the predictions, and then putting it back into planning versions. So all of those things you can automate in this framework, but you need to be smart. And we also have a enterprise application landscape, meaning we need to make sure that the actuals are also final before we start all of these steps. So align those timelines and schedules that you have within your organization and leave a little bit of slack. And there's no need for those extra hours. It doesn't help. Make sure you leave that slack. You don't have to rework it, and then you can really automate it because it's a trusted flow that you follow. Then again, automation is great, but you don't want to be out of the loop. You want to have a full understanding of what's really happening. So with this automation, you do want some checks and balances in there. And there's two great moments for that. It's when the data has come in, so you can review the new trends that you see in the actuals. You can compare it to other trends that you've expected. And you can also compare your past predictions. How accurate were they really? And potentially a different model would have been a better step in retrospective, and you learn as you go. The second moment is when you've run your predictions. Then again, you run your checks and balances to figure out, oh, this is the outcome, and that's why I'm going for this model specifically. It helps you get a thorough understanding of what's in there so that the predictive model is not some magic happening in the background. No, you know exactly what's in it and how you can get the value from it. So these are some of the tips and learnings for automation, and thinking about the model and the predictive design, aligning those timelines and schedules, and make sure they're aligned with the timelines of your organization, and some checks and balances so you have a thorough understanding through all of this automation. The second thing is making it pretty. What do we mean with this? Might be a bit of a loaded term, but what we mean with it is that you find it appealing to get into those results, that you dive into it, and it's easy to understand and convey its meaning. So this is twofold. First step is the reviewing, so understanding the predictive models that have been produced. And I won't speak too much about it now, because actually Antoine and team has made this quite easy and are also developing further on making this as easy as possible to review your predictive planning results. And you will see that in a few minutes, the direction that we're taking here. So I'll focus on the second bit, which is presenting it back. So presenting it back, and you saw it in the example of Natalia. Here I'm looking at an example of another colleague of Natalia, Eric, that has also created such a page in which we compare the different predictive results. I can zoom into them, I can understand them, but no less important, I also add some commentary. So for forecast holder number 7, so that's our 7th model, we supply comments. Why have we chosen this prediction? What is behind this prediction? What are the assumptions that we work with, potential influences that we've used? So not just for me as the person creating these predictions, because for me it's quite understandable. That's what I've created. I'm of course behind this. But for the person that's reviewing my results, it's extremely important that they get the gist of it quickly. And this is really what the comprehensive solution of SAP Analytics Cloud brings. And it allows you to bring that analytics together with a narrative, together with your plan, together with your forecast. Then the final bit, and this is something that I really liked. And what you saw in the use case of Natalia, Natalia is already extremely self-sufficient when we even started the project. So we learned from Natalia's setup, and we made sure we have a repeatable structure. So we will always do it more or less the same way, with a review page for the actuals, a smart predict or predictive planning page to figure out what have the predictions done, and then a forecasting where we present our results in a different way. You see two of Natalia's colleagues here on the screen. So you see Eric on the left that has created a output page, and Manuel on the right that has also created an output page. But you see it's quite different, and this is the freedom and creativity that is needed for controllers. They all have a different way of working, different nuances, and they're working on different use cases. So it's very important that you give them this freedom to build and work the models in the way that they'd like to do, but reap the benefits, of course, from the automation and making it pretty we discussed earlier. So I was really excited to see them both work on their own. And that brings me to the final bit, making them work on their own. So when we started this project, it was one of the main objectives is that I, as the solution manager, would be as hands-off as soon as possible. So this means I wouldn't build, well, initially, yes, but from the start, I started building less and less. And now, towards the end, Eric and Manuel that you see on the screen are building the predictive models, working on the analytics models, creating their own output pages, adjusting their own output pages themselves. So that's why you see that big red line through my face. It is because I'm not needed, and I shouldn't be needed. And the way that we've built this process is that they learn on the job, learn by doing, and this has made them self-sufficient. And I think that is the highest goal we were going for, and also what we see now with infrastructure expenses live and the motivation to take the full P&L with automated predictive forecasting to save time and focus on other elements. So a lot of ambition there, and quite excited to see it, even though I'm now at a distance. We've learned a lot here. And this project was very exciting, but it also helps us think about what should we develop for the future. So that's why I'm excited to give the word to Antoine, who will tell us where we will be going with this project.
Thanks so much, Nick. Let me just share my screen, and we'll walk you through the last bit of the presentation. And actually, to start with, so beyond what was shown actually by the great use case of Nick and Natalia, so that experience of SAP Controlling, we are now at a date where we celebrate actually the second birthday of Predictive Planning. So Predictive Planning was introduced in SAP Analytics Cloud 2 years ago. And of course, beyond the use that we show of SAP Global Controlling, we have literally hundreds of customers that are using the capabilities today. So we don't have time, of course, to go to every use cases, but one of the flagship examples that we present, that I would like to present today, is actually the use case of Roche. So Roche is, of course, a pharmaceutical company, and they have been using predictive planning to forecast their research and development expenses across cost center and cost type. And of course, they have a huge budget there, and they want to keep that budget under control. So they are leveraging the capabilities of SAP Cloud, the forecasting capabilities, the planning capabilities. And you can see at the end of the journey, the benefit they got in terms of automation, in terms of quickness in doing the forecast, in terms of improvement to their forecast accuracy. So that's another inspiring example. You will have a few links in the presentation. You can refer to that in detail. But that is part of that really momentum to automate and to accelerate the planning activities. So of course, I mentioned this birthday of the 2 years, and in the 2 years we have been developing the product, and from inception, from day one, we have been working on key advantages of predictive planning. So of course, first, what you expect from a predictive engine is accuracy. You want accuracy, and that's something we offer, this ability to forecast accurately at scale. So even, of course, if we work in direction of controllers, placing the power of predictive in their end, accuracy is a must, right? It's a must-have as part of the offering. The second point, and Nick alluded to that a lot, is this notion of automation, this notion of integration, the fact that we can couple actually very close together the predictive piece and the planning piece. So we don't operate actually the predictive capabilities or the forecasting capabilities as a silo, but directly as part of the planning process. And what's another important point is really this ability of self-service. We don't offer our capabilities primarily in direction of data scientists. So we cannot assume that our end users, they will have the notion of actually to operate different algorithms. So we have to make sure the experience is simple enough in the way that was demonstrated by Natalia, so that we can give everyone the product to predict, because at the end of the day, our end users, they will come directly from the finance department, from the sales department, from the HR department. And the important point, and Natalia alluded to that as well, is that notion of trust, crystal clear predictions. So of course, the predictive engine could give me a number, could tell me it's 42, but as a controller, I'm not in a position then to make sense about that, right? So I need more insight. I need actually the full visibility to where the predictions are coming from, so that I can then in turn trust the model. So in the next slide, I want to walk you through some of the recent highlights in terms of incremental development this year in this area of predictive planning, and what we are planning in terms of the roadmap. And of course, and Nick mentioned that, the notion of automation, that's probably the major thing we brought to the product this year, in the first quarter of 2022, it's the ability to have actually an automated loop. I have my data, be it in BW, be it in my different data sources, and I bring that to planning models in SAP Cloud. And of course, then I want to actually retrain. I want to constantly deliver predictive forecast into my story. So you really have this constant loop of new data flowing in months after months after months. And of course, on top of that, you want to consider this latest actual. You want to take them into account in the time series forecasting scenario. And at the end of the day, the experience for the controller should be as simple as being into the story, pushing a button, and actually triggering all this refresh loop behind the scene. So that's the reality in the product today, what you can do. The second point that we work on a lot, of course, with the development we had in the third quarter of 2022, and we have another one coming in the fourth quarter of 2022, is that notion of trust. And for instance, as part of my data model, I could introduce influencers, drivers, so business drivers that are going to have an influence to the forecast. And today, already in the product, at least before that we introduced that new development, there was actually a quantification of that impact. So that's what you have on top of the screen, this percentage. But what we introduced in the third quarter was actually additional visualization to give you the visibility. Okay, there it says that there is an influence of the maximum temperature to the way people are renting bikes in London. But actually, what does that mean, right? And with that new visualization, I can see actually the hotter the temperature, the more people are renting this bike, which sounds a little bit obvious from a business standpoint, but that's really the visibility I need to get as a controller to confirm my hypothesis, or actually for me to get new insights. So now when we look future developments, and some of these future developments are actually coming in the short term, because right now we have our fourth quarterly release this year for SAP Cloud that is planned for November for customers that are on quarterly schedule. And we have the same kind of fine-grained visualization for cycle. So here, for instance, it says in the time series forecasting model that I have an impact on the day of the week I'm renting this bike, a weekly cycles, right? And so what is the exact impact for each of the different days? With this new visualization impact of cycle, I can see actually more people are renting bikes on Fridays. And so the impact to the bike rentals is going to be higher, but the impact is going to be less on Saturdays and again high on Sundays. So again, opening the box, giving the full visibility to the insights. So beyond that development that is coming on Q4, we have another development that is planned. And so, of course, because we are discussing future release, this is a plan and can be subject to change. But the idea as part of that automation we have into multi-action is to bring additional capabilities. So for instance, as a controller that's evaluating the predictive forecast into stories, I want to actually maybe create my own ways of reviewing the predictive forecast, my own analysis of variance, my own statistical indicators. Maybe MAPE is not enough for me, and I want to create something ad hoc or something that relates more to my business. So the plan that we have in Q1 is to introduce these little advanced settings that you see to actually give that possibility to write back not only the forecast for the future period, but also for the past period, and then give that ability to story builder, to controller, to actually create their own ways of reviewing the predictive forecast, which is something very important in speaking directly or letting that flexibility to the controllers that Nick was mentioning. Beyond that, and of course with that beyond and things that are more far away in times come more uncertainty. So again, the current plan, but we want to go really in that area of trust even deeper, that deep understanding of predictive forecasts. So for instance, and this is a mock-up that you can see in that screen, but when I get a specific number for a given month, say February or March or April, I want to get the full visibility again. Where is that coming from? That number 42 that I was mentioning, where is that coming from? Is it coming from the current trend, how things are evolving? Is it coming from the fact that maybe February is a really specific month and something is happening that month, or a specific event? Or any additional information, I want to, again, have the full visibility not only to the predictive model globally, but to each and every individual forecasted data point. Where is that forecasting data point coming from, and how are the different components of the model explaining that precise data point? Ultimately, you can say that helps in answering the question of the why. Why my forecast is planned to be 32,000 euros in February, right? So that deep understanding comes only with that really opening of the box and giving the full visibility to the insights. Another topic that is quite important, and that feedback we receive from our customers, is actually, of course, there is this idea around doing the predictions and just on the basis of the past actuals, getting what could be the forecast. But beyond that, sometimes there is this notion that, of course, there is a lot of uncertainty. What could happen in the future? And there I want to play with different scenarios, right? Nick was mentioning that a lot of uncertainty is happening in the current world, and of course, as part of every business, I want to take into account as much as possible this uncertainty, play with different scenarios, an optimistic scenario, a pessimistic scenario, a median scenario, or as many scenarios that I want. And then what if energy prices are going to be double in the next 3 months, right? Or maybe it's going to be only increased by 50% or by 10%, right? And that is going to have an impact, of course, to my energy expenses. So as a controller, I want to not only get one version of the truth with predictive forecasting, but also as many versions of the truth as realistic scenarios that could happen in the future, playing with my data models, playing with my influencer, using this automation framework to generate quickly as many scenarios as possible, and then I can choose and decide which one I'm going to go for. So that's already something I can do today in the product, but that's something we are going to continue to facilitate in the future by giving the ability, for instance, when I'm running predictive step in multi-action, not necessarily to have to retrain the predictive model every time, but sometimes just playing with the future values of the influencer, and then quickly having a notion of now I get the forecast for that precise scenario for the coming future. And just a word more globally to SAP Analytics Cloud, and I mean, in context of what we discussed, the SAP controlling use case, of course, some new needs are going to arise. And with Nick, with Natalia, with other colleagues, we work on this idea, hey, you can bring these ideas that you have to the product improvement in this portal that we have, which is SAP Customer Influence. I guess some of you will be really familiar with that portal. So that's a place where anybody can go as long as they have a S user, and then they can enter new ideas how the product could be evolved in the future. And that's actually very important to my team, which is product management for SAP Analytics Cloud, to get this input, to get this feedback, to get to see the votes that are happening on new ideas, to see the momentum that is happening on new ideas, and consider how the product could evolve in the past. Because of course, we have our ideas, we have our designs, but we cannot think every use case, every needs that the customers are going to have. So we need your input there. And with that, I guess I would like to hand over to you, Lena. Maybe I'm going to stop sharing and we can move to a few questions.
Thank you, Antoine and Natalia and Nick for the content. I promised 45 minutes and you were pretty much on time. So we have now 15 minutes left for Q&A. There's no questions yet in the chat. But first of all, thank you all for your presentation. Second of all, I really like that you shared the future developments. I find that always interesting to what comes next. And also, I mean, to the audience, if you don't have any questions for Antoine, Natalia, and Nick, you can also comment on the content in the chat here on YouTube. And I know it's a lot of content, and sometimes that is basically where a lot of the audience feels a little bit overwhelmed maybe in the beginning. That's why I always like to ask you again to maybe summarize the main points of this call. So what shall our community members take away from this presentation? Anyone? Basically, who wants to? Okay.
I can take that, no worries. So I think we started with why does planning matter and why does predictive planning matter? And we see it as a cornerstone of our strategy. So we're heavily investing in it. As you saw from the bits of Antoine, we're making it better. We're listening to your feedback to make it better. So that's something that we really see. The second thing, so we highlighted how SAP uses our own predictive planning capabilities, the benefits that they've gained, and that's the most important part, right? Trying to do more with less, getting more accuracy, doing that automation so we can actually improve the life of the controller. That's something to focus on and where we're focusing our developments. Watch out. I know Antoine is busy with some customer examples that he'll be sharing shortly on the socials. So you'll see some more that's not just SAP using it, which we're generally excited about naturally. So I think the main bits there, right? Think about how you're going to apply the use case. There's learnings in the market from how SAP Controlling does it, but also how other customers are doing it, and help us influence the product predictive planning to the best it can potentially be using that influencer portal. I think that summarizes it. Okay.
Thank you, Nick. Any more key takeaways for our audience from your end, Natalia and/or Antoine?
No, I think that Nick summarized it perfectly.
Yeah, I think I like also that summary of Nick. I think it was very comprehensive. Yeah, from my side, I think the way we design the content today and is really to maybe show as much predictive planning is a reality today, right? It's not something really that you should consider as maybe a finance team, a controlling team, really distant from you. We are using it internally. It's a reality. We are investing into it. So I just want to encourage customers, partners to join the movement, right? Because I think it's really a movement that is happening right now. And of course, I mean, we are there also to help, right? So, I mean, if you look, Nick, myself, we are very active on the SAP community. Just this morning, I had a question from someone asking me something. I'm going maybe later on today to get back to it and give some support. So I think that's really this notion of engagement, reducing the distance to how you can benefit from that in your own organization. And that distance is not that far. It's actually just getting started, right? From my standpoint.
Nice that you mentioned that, Antoine. Also the question this morning in the community. Of course, if anyone has more questions regarding the topic, SAP Community is the place to go to. You can ask your questions. You can, of course, everyone's profile is added to the YouTube description. So you can follow Natalia, Nick, and Antoine in the SAP Community. Stay tuned with more announcements and blog posts from them, and engage with like-minded community members around the topics that you're interested in. So really glad that you mentioned it. I would also have mentioned it. And I also published or shared the link to the topic page of SAP Analytics Cloud in the chat. For further information, go to the topic page. All right. With that being said, there's no questions as of now. It's totally all right. As I just mentioned, if there is more questions, you can definitely come to the SAP community to post them there. With that, I'd like to thank you all for your time today. And I hope to have a community call with you coming up soon again. Take care and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.